Well, of course, 50 Shades of Grey is a play on words, but it's actually a useful metaphor on a number of different levels. Firstly, the concept of leadership itself is very complex and quite difficult to define. For example, leadership in a startup environment might look very different to, say, leading in a large global organisation. Secondly, our environment is constantly changing. Global mobility, technology, dynamic economy, all of these factors mean that businesses and business leaders need to respond with greater levels of agility. So our expectations of leaders are continually evolving. And thirdly, if we think about the tools that we actually use to assess leadership, again, this is another sort of whole plethora of different variables that we need to consider. Sometimes organisations slip into quite a binary approach in terms of how they assess leadership. For example, using psychometrics in isolation, people can actually start looking for clones and be quite black and white in their judgment, as opposed to considering the nuance of essentially leadership itself. So essentially, shades of grey on a number of different levels. This then begs the question of how we actually use leadership assessment to capture those elements of complexity and ambiguity. So we do this in a number of different ways. Firstly, we look at the distinctive qualities that are inherent in leaders. What are some of those signatures essentially of their success, and how can we capture those? And this involves us digging deeper to look at the different drivers, assumptions, values that are likely to enable leaders to be at their best. And likewise, thinking about potential areas of derailment. We also need to overlay that with the environments, the contexts in which leaders have excelled, and likewise where they've been challenged, and think about what that means for onboarding. And finally, in addition to leadership capability, we also need to look at leadership potential. So the emotional, social and intellectual elements of success that sit outside of experience and competence. And these are all ingredients that we need to then triangulate to get a rich understanding of leadership potential.